Imagine you're waking up in the dead of night.
Right, pitch black.
Yeah, the room is pitch black. It's completely silent.
Yeah.
And you just want to check the time.
Look, classic. You just reach over.
Exactly. You reach out, blindly feeling around your nightstand, where you always leave your cell phone plugged in.
Yeah.
But your hand just hits bare wood.
Which is, instantly frustrating.
Totally.
Yeah.
So you turn on the lamp, you pull back the sheets, check under the bed. The phone is it's completely gone.
It's banished.
Right. A frustrating mystery, sure. But let's say you take it a step further.
Okay.
The next day, you pull the GPS and the accelerometer data from your cellular carrier. You're expecting to see it pinging from, I don't know, the couch cushions or a coffee shop.
Sure, somewhere normal.
But instead, you look at the raw data, and you discover that at exactly 3:30 in the morning, your phone wasn't lost in the sheets.
Wait for it.
It was hovering exactly 60 feet directly above the roof of your house.
That is just, it's wild.
Right. It stayed suspended in thin air for several minutes, completely stationary, before seamlessly returning to your bedside table, right before you woke up.
See, that kind of data point completely shatters the fundamental mundane reality we think we inhabit.
Oh, absolutely.
It takes a routine annoyance and turns it into a profound violation of, personal space, but also just basic physics.
It changes everything about how you perceive the safety of your own bedroom,
Yeah.
Or imagine a different kind of paradigm shift.
Yeah.
Imagine learning that the very concept of time-like, linear way you and I experience a Tuesday rolling into a Wednesday is actually an illusion.
It's a really hard concept to grasp.
Right. That time is functionally like a burning cigar. And what if you found out that our government has spent decades, alongside millions upon millions of taxpayer dollars, funding highly classified military programs designed to train, ordinary soldiers, to see the unburned parts of that cigar?
To literally look into the future and the past.
Yes.
It forces a total reevaluation of what human consciousness is even capable of.
Which is honestly exactly our mission for this deep dive today.
We have a lot of ground to cover.
We really do.
Yeah.
We are taking an absolutely massive, mind-bending stack of source material today.
Oh, it's huge.
We are looking at recent, on-the-record congressional testimonies. We're pulling from incredibly candid, hours-long interrogations and interviews with whistleblowers.
Specifically featuring the former Pentagon official Luis Elizondo, right?
Yeah, exactly. The guy who ran the military's top-secret UFO program.
Right.
And we are looking at high-level, closed-door discussions on the architecture of government secrecy. Our goal is to unpack the physical nuts and bolts evidence of UAP's unidentified anomalous phenomena.
But we're not stopping there.
No, we definitely aren't. We are venturing into the biological implications of who might actually be driving them, analyzing the honestly deeply alarming documented string of missing scientists around the globe.
Which is terrifying, honestly.
It is. And finally, we are going to break down the bleeding-edge quantum physics that might actually explain how all of this impossible technology works.
But I think a vital note before we begin unpacking all this data.
Oh, yeah, please.
The stack of sources we were examining includes highly publicized claims from political figures across the ideological spectrum.
Right.
You have figures like Representative Tim Burchett and Representative Matt Gaetz entering deeply controversial topics into the congressional record.
Yeah.
Topics ranging from alleged shadow government retrieval programs to forced hybrid breeding operations.
Oh, thank you for highlighting that, because we need to be crystal clear with you, the listener, before we take another step into this.
Extremely clear.
Our goal today is strictly to convey the ideas, the physical data, and the specific claims contained in this source material.
Yeah, we are absolutely not taking any political sides here.
Exactly. We are not endorsing any of the viewpoints, the policies, or the political figures mentioned in these transcripts.
We're just the messengers.
Right. We are simply acting as your guides, mapping out the territory of these staggering claims so you can understand the sheer scale of the conversation that is happening behind closed doors at the highest levels of global intelligence right now.
We are analyzing the architecture of the claims themselves.
Yep.
And to do that properly, to build a sturdy foundation for the listener, we cannot start with the most fantastical, reality-bending elements.
We really can't.
We must begin where the evidence is the most tangible, the most measurable.
The raw, staggering physical data. The nuts and bolts. Because before we can even begin to theorize about who or what might be piloting these phenomena, we have to establish what our military sensors, our radar, our forward-looking infrared, our sonar, are actually tracking in physical space.
What are the material realities of these objects?
Exactly.
And this brings us directly into the heavily documented congressional testimony regarding ATIP, the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program.
Right, the Pentagon program.
Yeah, this was the highly classified program previously run by Luis Elizondo. When you read through the operational mandate of ATIP, one of the core directives...
Like the main reason it existed.
Yeah, the primary reason this program was funded and hidden away was the active attempt to collect materials of unknown origin.
They weren't just cataloging blurry videos on YouTube.
No, not at all. They were actively trying to acquire the physical, crashed debris of these crafts.
Let's really dig into this attempt to collect material, because the bureaucracy surrounding it is almost as fascinating and, as maddening as the exotic material itself.
Oh, the red tape is unbelievable.
The whistleblower testimonies detail an alleged incident that has roots stretching all the way back to the 1950s.
Right.
Fast forward to a more modern context, and the documents point to a specific aerospace contractor, Bigelow Aerospace.
Yeah, Bigelow.
According to the claims, Bigelow was in possession of some of this recovered anomalous material.
Real physical pieces.
Yeah. And for various reasons involving liability or maybe just a lack of progress in reverse engineering it, Bigelow allegedly wanted to divest itself of this material.
Yeah, they wanted to formally transfer it over to Lockheed Martin.
Exactly. Another massive defense contractor with way deeper research pockets.
Yeah.
But the transfer was abruptly blocked.
He was shut down.
The CIA stepped in and halted the entire physical exchange.
And the mechanism of that blockage is what reveals the inner workings of these covert programs.
This is the crazy part.
Yeah, because the transfer of this highly sensitive, anomalous material wasn't stopped by, a dramatic military standoff with guns.
Right, like in a movie.
No, it was blocked because a specific, deeply obscure bureaucratic requirement wasn't met.
It's always paperwork.
Always. Within the framework of these special access programs, or SAPs, transferring physical assets of this magnitude between private defense contractors required explicit written authorization.
A very specific signature.
Exactly. Specifically, they needed a memo from the Secretary of the Air Force. That signature was the key to unlocking the vault.
But that memo never came.
Never.
The request just vanished into the Pentagon's bureaucratic ether. And if you think about how government contracting works, this is a brilliant way to kill a project without leaving a paper trail of denial.
It really is.
You just never sign the approval, you leave it in an eternal holding pattern.
And it became such a bottleneck for the ATIP team that later on, when General James Mattis took over as the Secretary of Defense, Elizondo and his intelligence colleagues formulated a new strategy.
Right, they tried to go around it.
Exactly. They believed that by briefing Mattis directly, they could secure a memo from the SECDF himself.
Because he outranks the Air Force.
The logic was that a directive from the Secretary of Defense would outrank and bypass the Air Force's bureaucratic stonewalling, finally allowing this exotic material to be transferred to scientists who could actually study it.
Which is wild.
But the broader implication here for the listener is profound.
Yeah, what does this actually mean?
This entire saga proves we aren't just talking about pilots seeing strange lights in the sky. We are talking about highly compartmentalized. The sonar data indicated this object was operating with the same impossible physics-defying kinematics underwater as the aerial phenomena exhibit in our atmosphere.
Which makes no sense.
Right. To understand how impossible this is, you just have to consider the density of water.
Okay, break that down for us.
Well, water is roughly 800 times denser than air.
800 times.
Yes. Moving a physical object through that medium at hundreds of knots should create massive acoustic signatures.
Right. Shouldn't be quiet.
Specifically cavitation, where the low pressure behind a fast-moving object actually boils the water, creating a deafening trail of collapsing bubbles.
It should be incredibly loud on sonar.
It should be deafening, yet this object moved at blinding speeds silently, without any cavitation.
No friction. No displacement noise.
Yeah.
But here is where the data gets genuinely terrifying, I think.
Let's talk about the G-forces.
Oh, the G-forces are absurd.
I want to break down the physics of this for a second so everyone listening can really, visualize what we were dealing with. Let's start with the human baseline.
The human body, under the most optimal conditions imaginable, can withstand maybe 9 Gs of force.
And that's pushing it.
Yeah, and that's assuming you are a highly trained fighter pilot wearing a specialized pressurized G-suit that literally squeezes your legs to force blood back up into your torso.
Right.
And you are doing intense practiced breathing exercises to keep your heart pumping.
The Hick maneuver.
Exactly. Even with all that, at 9 Gs, the blood rapidly drains from your brain.
You lose vision.
Yeah, you experience a loss of color vision, then tunnel vision, then a total blackout, and shortly after, death. 9 Gs is the absolute ceiling of our biology.
Because the physical architecture of our cardiovascular system simply cannot push against that level of gravitational pressure.
That's a hard biological limit.
Yeah.
Now let's look at the absolute ceiling of our material science and technology.
The machines.
Right. Let's take the F-16 fighter jet, manufactured by General Dynamics. It is one of the most agile, highly maneuverable aircraft ever engineered by human beings.
Incredible machine.
But the aerospace data, cited in the sources, shows that an F-16 airframe can handle approximately 17 or 18 Gs before it experiences catastrophic structural failure.
It just falls apart.
We aren't talking about the engine stalling. We mean the sheer force of inertia against the titanium and advanced composite materials causes the wings to literally shear off.
Wow.
The airframe disintegrates and rips apart in midair because the atomic bonds of the metal cannot withstand the stress.
Right, because the kinetic energy required to change the direction of that much mass moving at that speed is greater than the tensile strength of the materials holding it together.
Exactly.
It is a hard mathematical limit of classical physics.
Exactly. So to recap, the human pilot dies at 9 Gs. The cutting-edge titanium aircraft rips into a cloud of shrapnel at 18 Gs.
Yep.
Now, let's look at the radar and telemetry data analyzed by ATIP.
This is where it gets crazy.
These unidentified crafts are routinely recorded performing instantaneous right-angle turns and accelerations that calculate out to maneuvers in excess of 1,000, 2,000, and even 3,000 Gs.
It's just a figure of 3,000 Gs is so far beyond our technological capability that it almost sounds like a mathematical
Right, a glitch.
until you see it corroborated by multiple independent state-of-the-art sensor platforms simultaneously.
I was trying to come up with a way to visualize this gap in technology. If you have an F-16 pilot trying to intercept and dogfight a craft capable of pulling 3,000 Gs,
Good luck.
it is literally like putting a person in a battery-powered golf cart and asking them to outmaneuver a Japanese bullet train.
That's a perfect analogy.
It's not even a comparison of similar technologies.
Mm.
It is a completely different paradigm of existence. But this raises a glaring fundamental question. If a machine is pulling 3,000 Gs, we have to ask, do we even possess a theoretical understanding of materials science, some hypothetical supermetal that wouldn't instantly vaporize, shatter, or turn into plasma under the stress of 3,000 times the force of Earth's gravity?
And the most revealing aspect of Elizondo's testimony is the answer to that specific question.
Which is?
The answer is definitively no.
No.
If the object is subjected to the classical laws of aerodynamics and inertia, as we currently apply them, no combination of atoms on the periodic table can survive that maneuver.
It's impossible.
It's a physical impossibility. And this points directly to what the ATIP program defined as instantaneous acceleration, which became one of their 5 core observables.
Okay.
When military sensors track a craft pulling 3,000 Gs, the analysts aren't looking at a vehicle equipped with a massive propulsion system and superior aerodynamic control surfaces.
Right, it's not just a really fast jet.
Exactly. They are observing a vehicle that is fundamentally bypassing the physical law of inertia entirely.
Wait, I want to make sure I'm fully wrapping my head around this. When you say bypassing inertia completely, you mean the object isn't actually experiencing the G-force.
Precisely.
Wow.
In classical aerospace engineering, an airplane flies by pushing air over and under a physical wing to create lift, and it uses thrust to push against the atmosphere.
Right.
It is intimately interacting with the environment.
Yeah.
But the theoretical physics proposed by the Pentagon analysts suggests that these UAPs are doing something entirely different. They are manipulating space-time itself.
How does that even work?
They are creating a localized gravitational envelope, a bubble, essentially around the craft.
Okay.
The craft isn't actually moving through space. It is folding the space in front of it and expanding the space behind it. Within that bubble, the craft remains in a state of zero gravity.
So it's perfectly still inside the bubble.
Yes. Therefore, when the bubble darts to the left at 3,000 Gs, the craft inside and whatever might be occupying it experiences 0 Gs.
That is mind-blowing.
The space-time envelope protects them from being crushed into a microscopic paste.
That conceptual leap transitions us to the most immediate terrifying causal question, though.
Which is?
If these objects are capable of generating localized gravity bubbles to pull 3,000 G maneuvers, and we know they aren't just natural weather anomalies like swamp gas.
Right, obviously not.
And they aren't just radar sensor glitches. Are they manned? Is there a biological entity sitting inside that zero-G bubble? Like who or what is in the driver's seat?
Well, we must cross the threshold from physics into the biological question.
Let's do it.
Because the source material firmly suggests that the intelligence community possesses evidence of intelligent control.
Yes, intelligent control.
Elizondo described a deeply unsettling piece of evidence during his investigations. He gained access to secure, encrypted Navy email traffic between senior officers and radar operators.
And what do emails say?
These emails explicitly described how U.S. naval carrier strike groups were literally being stalked by these UAPs for days on end. The data showed these crafts were anticipating the Navy's classified rendezvous points. They were reacting to human fighter jets in real time.
A weather balloon doesn't anticipate your next move.
Exactly. That kind of behavior implies a cognitive presence, a mind, and intelligence actively assessing and reacting to our capabilities.
The behavior displays deliberate, strategic intention.
A game of cat and mouse played over the open ocean.
And this behavioral evidence of intelligence brings us to the highly controversial claims regarding biologics.
Yes, the biologics.
This is the section of the source material where we must address the congressional testimonies of figures like Tim Burchett and Matt Gaetz.
Right.
These representatives have gone on the record citing briefings from whistleblowers regarding not just recovered, non-human biological bodies from crash sites.
Which is crazy enough.
Right, but much more distressingly, the alleged existence of active, ongoing hybrid breeding programs.
Yeah, that's where it goes to a whole new level.
If you're listening to this on your commute right now, you might be gripping the steering wheel a little tighter, because this is the part of the congressional record that sounds completely unhinged.
It really does.
It sounds like a script from a late-night 1990s sci-fi thriller. Representative Gaetz formally relayed a briefing he received from a high-ranking military officer who claimed intimate knowledge of forced biological programs.
Forced biological programs.
The allegation is that these non-human entities are actively abducting human beings, specifically targeting vulnerable populations in active war zones.
Or pulling people out of massive migrant caravans moving across borders where they won't be easily tracked.
Exactly. And the stated purpose of these abductions?
To harvest genetic material.
To harvest genetic material and create a hybrid race to facilitate intergalactic or interdimensional communication.
And within the esoteric UFO investigative community, and explicitly referenced in the source documents, there is a specific chilling acronym for this phenomenon. MILABs, yes. It stands for military abductions. The MILAB hypothesis suggests the deeply unsettling narrative that there have been covert, cooperative agreements struck between rogue elements of the U.S. military-industrial complex and these non-human entities.
Wait, like a treaty?
Allegedly dating all the way back to the Eisenhower administration in the 1950s. The core tenet of this claim is a dark exchange. The U.S. government receives access to exotic, reality-bending technology.
The anti-gravity stuff.
Right. And in return, they turn a blind eye, allowing these entities a quota of human specimens for genetic research.
Okay, I have to step in and push back on this crossbreeding my lab narrative, just on a purely logical, scientific level.
Go for it.
I am trying to view this through the lens of a hyper-advanced civilization.
Okay.
If we are talking about beings that are potentially hundreds of thousands of years ahead of us technologically, beings that understand how to solve spacetime, bypass the laws of inertia, and generate energy fields that make our nuclear reactors look like campfires, why on earth do they need to physically, clumsily abduct people from their beds in the middle of the night to harvest DNA?
It seems inefficient.
We map genomes with a cheek swab today. Wouldn't a civilization that advanced just take one microscopic blood sample, perfectly sequence the human genome, and then industrially synthesize whatever biological material they need in a pristine orbital lab?
It's a great point.
The physical abduction seems so primitive.
Your objection is rooted in excellent critical thinking. Why utilize such crude physical intervention when their propulsion physics is so elegant?
Exactly.
However, if we look closely at Elizondo's counter-arguments in the source material, he addresses the biological viability and necessity of this process.
Oh, really? What does he say?
He argues that genetic manipulation and hybridization aren't as far-fetched or biologically impossible as we assume. He points out a humbling fact. Human beings share roughly 90% of our DNA with a common banana.
A banana, that's true.
The building blocks of biological life are incredibly universal on this planet. And more importantly, human scientists are already performing radical genetic splicing today.
We have CRISPR.
We possess CRISPR technology. We routinely take the bioluminescent DNA from jellyfish and splice it into the embryos of rats and sheep.
Creating mammals that literally glow in the dark under UV light.
Exactly.
Which is a profound and slightly terrifying reminder of how fast our own biological sciences are moving. If we can make a rat glow, what could an intelligence a million years older than us do?
Precisely. The mechanical process of cross-species genetics is already within our primitive grasp. As to your question of why an advanced intelligence might need to physically harvest and repeatedly interbreed rather than just synthesizing it.
Yeah, why do they keep coming back?
The sources lean into several hypotheses. Perhaps their species has suffered severe genetic degradation over millennia of space travel or environmental collapse.
Making them incapable of natural reproduction.
Right, or perhaps they view humanity not as equals, but as a vast, diverse biological resource.
Like a farm.
Yeah. They might be seeking the specific, rugged adaptability coded into human DNA, our unique biological ability to survive and reproduce in environments ranging from the sub-zero Arctic tundra to the zero-gravity environment of the International Space Station.
We are remarkably resilient species.
Very resilient.
But the whistleblower testimonies also challenge us to completely redefine what the word life even means, don't they? We are so trapped in our terrestrial bias.
A vital point. Elizondo notes that our rigid textbook definition of what constitutes life has been proven wrong time and time again.
Oh, totally.
A few decades ago, biologists were certain that complex life absolutely required oxygen and direct sunlight to survive.
Without a doubt.
Then, deep-sea submersibles discovered teeming ecosystems at the bottom of the Mariana Trench.
The hydrothermal vents.
Exactly. They found incredibly complex creatures,
Yeah.
like giant tube worms and specialized crabs, living in the crushing pressure of the abyss, utterly devoid of sunlight.
It's incredible. These organisms survive entirely off chemosynthesis, processing the toxic, superheated chemicals spewing from volcanic thermal vents. We also found anaerobic bacteria thriving in completely oxygen-deprived environments.
Life finds a way.
Life finds a way to exist in paradigms we previously deemed impossible.
So we shouldn't project our fragile biological requirements, like needing a specific mix of nitrogen and oxygen, needing exactly 1 g of gravity, onto an entity that might have evolved in a radically different environment.
We really can't make those assumptions.
But here is the specific detail from the biological data that I can't stop thinking about. The morphology.
The shape.
The physical shape of these beings. The crash retrieval reports and the abduction accounts constantly, almost uniformly, describe entities with bilateral symmetry.
They have 2 arms, 2 legs, a torso, a head, 2 eyes.
Exactly. If these things evolved in a completely different star system, under a different colored sun, with different planetary gravity and atmospheric pressure, why do they look like us?
It's a huge question.
Does the prevalence of bilateral symmetry mean the humanoid form is just the most efficient, universal evolutionary vehicle in the cosmos?
It could be convergent evolution on a galactic scale, yes.
But
If we connect this morphological similarity to the broader environmental data, a profound pivot emerges in the source material. What if their bilateral symmetry isn't a cosmic coincidence?
oh, okay.
What if it points to a shared terrestrial ancestry?
Wait.
This introduces what researchers call the neighbors, not visitors hypothesis.
Oh, I find this concept absolutely fascinating. Break down the neighbor hypothesis for the listener.
Well, if these entities share basic bilateral symmetry, 2 eyes, a mouth, and fundamental genetic compatibility with human beings, to the point where hybridization is even theoretically possible.
Right.
Perhaps we're looking at this all wrong. Perhaps they didn't traverse the freezing, infinite vacuum of deep space to reach us. The hypothesis posits that they're from right here.
From Earth.
They are native to Earth. Consider how little we know about our own planet. We have mapped the surface of Mars in higher resolution than we have mapped the bottom of our own oceans.
That's a crazy fact, but it's true.
There are vast, unexplored subterranean environments, massive cave networks, and deep oceanic trenches. What if a sentient species evolved here alongside humanity, but branched off millions of years ago?
Wow.
They retreated to the oceans or deep Earth, taking a radically different, highly advanced technological evolutionary path. while we stayed on the surface and mastered fire and combustion.
So they aren't visitors from Alpha Centauri.
They are our neighbors. And humanity is only just now developing the radar and sonar technology sensitive enough to perceive the traffic of a civilization that has been sharing our planet all along.
That reframing completely shifts the psychological dynamic of the phenomenon.
It does.
If they are our neighbors and they possess this godlike reality-bending technology, it makes perfect, predictable sense that humanity, specifically our defense departments and the military-industrial complex, is going to obsessively try to figure out how their toys work.
Oh, without a doubt.
We are going to capture it, hide it, and try to reverse engineer it to build better weapons. But as we transition into the next phase of the source material, the data reveals that poking around in the engine of a UAP is not just a difficult physics problem.
No, it is not.
Historically and currently, it is an incredibly lethally dangerous profession.
We are entering the true danger zone of this deep dive, the lethal enforcement of technological secrecy.
To understand the modern, cutthroat pursuit of this exotic tech, the source material forces us to look backward. We have to look at the history of Huntsville, Alabama.
Rocket City.
A place famously known as Rocket City, yeah. And a highly controversial post-World War II program known as Operation Paperclip.
Right, Paperclip.
As the ashes of the Second World War were still smoldering, the United States government made a deeply cynical, pragmatic decision.
Very pragmatic.
They initiated a covert program to identify, recruit, and bring over more than 1,600 former Nazi scientists to the U.S.
The most famous of these figures is Wernher von Braun.
Right. This was the genius engineer who created the V-2 rocket that rained horrific destruction down on London.
The U.S. scrubbed his record, gave him a lab, and he eventually built the Saturn V rocket that took American astronauts to the moon.
The underlying ruthless philosophy of Operation Paperclip was clear. Absorb the enemy's brain trust before the Soviet Union could.
The U.S. military wanted to exploit their advanced, often highly unethical research.
And according to the historical threads pulled in the source material, the U.S. wasn't just interested in liquid propellant rocket engines. They were hunting for exotic physics.
Yes, the documents allege that this transfer of knowledge included highly classified, highly experimental anti-gravity research.
Anti-gravity.
Specifically, the fabled Nazi device known as Die Glock, or the Bell.
Tell us about the Bell.
This was reportedly a heavy, bell-shaped contraption that utilized incredibly potent counter-rotating magnetic fields. The theory was that by spinning highly charged liquid metal plasmas at extreme velocities, a field known today as spintronics, you could disrupt the local gravitational field and achieve lift without aerodynamic thrust.
The U.S. military wanted that anti-gravity knowledge, and they clearly didn't care about the moral cost of who they had to hire to get it.
Not at all.
They seeded that deep, black budget, do-whatever-it-takes culture of aerospace secrecy heavily into the institutions in Huntsville, Alabama.
Which brings us to today.
Exactly. That specific geography and culture brings us to the tragic, modern, and chillingly relevant case of a scientist named Amy Eskridge.
Her story is an incredibly sobering pivot from historical theory to modern casualties.
It's so tragic. You know, if you read the accounts of Amy's life in the source material, she is described as an absolute polymath, a brilliant mind.
Brilliant.
She held a double major in chemistry and biology, alongside masterful expertise in electrical engineering and physics. She was the co-founder of an organization in Huntsville called the Institute for Exotic Science.
Right.
She, working closely with her father, was deep into theoretical physics. They were working on, and reportedly claimed to colleagues, that they had successfully perfected a functioning anti-gravity technology.
Now, in a normal world, a breakthrough like that means you are flying to Stockholm to accept a Nobel Prize.
Exactly. It means limitless clean energy and a revolution in human transport. But Amy wasn't celebrating. According to her inner circle, she was living in absolute terror.
She began communicating to close colleagues and friends that she was being aggressively stalked.
Stalked by who?
She claimed she was enduring heavy systemic harassment perpetrated by operatives working for major, unnamed defense contractors.
These private entities allegedly wanted to violently suppress her anti-gravity work to maintain their monopoly on aerospace technology.
But it is the specific physical method of harassment she described that links her terrifying ordeal to a much wider, darker pattern of intelligence operations.
Yeah, this is the scary part.
Amy claimed that these operatives were actively targeting her home and her person using directed energy weapons.
Commonly referred to as DDoDWs.
Exactly.
I want to spend some time unpacking directed energy weapons because to the average listener, that sounds like a phaser from Star Trek.
It really does.
But this isn't science fiction. The physics of this exists right now, and the sources relate the core concept to an appliance sitting in almost everyone's kitchen, the microwave oven.
It's a perfect grounding analogy.
Let's explain how this actually works.
The next time you look at your microwave, notice the glass window on the door. Embedded in that glass is a fine metallic mesh screen.
Right.
That screen is a Faraday cage. It is there for a critical reason: to stop the high-frequency microwave radiation generated inside the box from bleeding out into your kitchen.
Because microwaves work by emitting electromagnetic radiation that specifically targets water molecules.
Yes. Water molecules have a positive end and a negative end. The microwave field rapidly flips back and forth millions of times a second, causing those water molecules to spin and vibrate violently.
That microscopic friction generates intense heat, cooking your food.
Exactly. Now, consider that the human body is roughly 60% water.
60%.
If you take that microwave emitter, remove the protective cage, amplify the power source exponentially, and focus the beam into a tight cone like a laser pointer,
You have a directed energy weapon.
you have a weapon.
You have a weapon that doesn't fire a bullet, doesn't make a sound, leaves no shrapnel, but interacts violently and invisibly with human biology.
And the sources state that when this high-frequency directed energy hits a person, the intense localized cellular vibration actually disrupts the genetic code.
Oh, wow.
It breaks the strands of human DNA and literally begins to cook the internal organs from the inside out.
That is the grim physical mechanism. And this technology ties directly and publicly into the heavily reported phenomenon known as Havana syndrome.
Yes, Havana syndrome.
The U.S. government and the CIA have formally recognized that dozens of their intelligence officers, diplomats, and embassy staff operating overseas have been targeted by silent, invisible weapons,
Victims report hearing a sudden piercing sound.
followed by severe vertigo, nausea, and ultimately documented traumatic brain injuries and severe neurological damage.
Furthermore, the source material notes a highly disturbing overlap in the medical data.
What's the overlap?
Military pilots who experience close-range encounters with UAPs often return to base suffering from superficial radiation poisoning.
Their skin is red, inflamed, and blotchy, resembling a severe, rapid sunburn.
From a medical perspective, a severe epidermal burn is the exact first physical symptom you would expect when biological tissue is exposed to intense directed energy just before the radiation penetrates deeper into the major organs.
Which brings us back to the tragic fate of Amy Eskridge.
Right.
In June of 2022, at just 34 years old, this brilliant polymath was found dead.
Such a loss.
The official ruling was a self-inflicted gunshot wound, a suicide. But the source material highlights a glaring, deeply disturbing caveat.
Yes, and this is crucial.
In the months leading up to her death, as she was frantically reporting these directed energy attacks to her peers, she explicitly preemptively warned them.
She told her confidants, quote, "If you see any report that I took my own life, I most definitely did not."
It is a chilling detail that casts a profound shadow over the official investigative narrative.
And it is vital to understand that Amy Eskridge is not an isolated data point.
No, she's not.
The sources detail a much broader, statistically alarming pattern of missing, dead, or suicided scientists. Specifically, individuals who are intimately connected to sensitive aerospace, advanced defense propulsion, and exotic physics research programs.
And this isn't just an American phenomenon.
Right. No, the data shows this is a global purge.
The sources point out that recently, at least 10 highly placed scientists in China brilliant minds working on similar next-generation advanced military systems and cutting-edge artificial intelligence have also died under highly suspicious, abrupt circumstances.
We are talking about sudden, unexplained illnesses, strange single-car crashes on empty roads, or sudden falls from apartment balconies.
And to prove this is an ongoing tactic, the sources draw a direct historical parallel to an infamous cluster of deaths in the 1980s in the United Kingdom.
The Marconi scientists.
Exactly. Nearly 24 highly skilled computer scientists and engineers working for a massive British defense contractor called Marconi mysteriously died over a short period.
Many of them were ruled bizarre suicides, like a man who allegedly tied himself to a tree.
Or another who inexplicably drove his car off a bridge.
These Marconi scientists were working on a highly classified deep-water torpedo research program called Cosmos, which had direct integrated ties to the U.S. Star Wars Ballistic Missile Defense Initiative.
The historical pattern of utilizing lethal enforcement to maintain technological supremacy is long, dark, and thoroughly documented.
Very thoroughly. During the height of the Cold War, state intelligence apparatuses developed incredibly bizarre, undetectable methods to silence dissidents, whistleblowers, and threats.
The sources recall the famous 1978 assassination in London of the Bulgarian dissident Georgy Markov.
Right, the umbrella.
Yeah. An assassin simply walked past them on a crowded bridge and used a specially modified umbrella.
The tip of the umbrella contained a microscopic pneumatic mechanism that injected a tiny platinum iridium sphere no bigger than a pinhead into Markov's leg.
And the sphere was drilled with holes containing a single lethal grain of ricin toxin. Markov died days later of a mysterious fever.
The sources also mention the CIA's development of hidden cyanide dart guns rolled up in newspapers, which cause a massive heart attack and leave no trace.
Or the blatant assassination of Gerald Bull, the brilliant aerospace engineer who developed the massive HARP supergun. He was gunned down outside his apartment when his research threatened geopolitical stability.
It's brutal.
All right, I need to pause here and ask a deeply grounding, skeptical question.
I'm ready.
I am trying to view this through the lens of Occam's razor.
Sure.
We know the U.S. and China are currently locked in a massive, high-stakes technological Cold War.
Quantum computing, AI, hypersonic glide vehicles.
Right. Could these missing and dead scientists just be the unfortunate victims of standard, albeit brutal, international espionage?
It's a fair question.
Like maybe the Chinese intelligence apparatus is just ruthlessly assassinating compromised U.S. assets, and the CIA is doing the same to theirs. Does this string of deaths have to be the work of a rogue shadow government protecting crashed UFO secrets?
That is exactly the right question to ask, and the analysts within the source material acknowledge this inherent tension.
Right.
The mundane answer is terrifying enough. It could very well be foreign adversaries engaging in a ruthless, bloody shadow war over next-generation conventional military tech.
Which makes sense.
However,
Here's the however.
However, the specific whistleblower testimony we are analyzing strongly suggests that the enforcement of secrecy surrounding UAP reverse engineering programs operates with that exact same level of lethality and tradecraft.
Wow.
Whether the trigger is being pulled by a Russian FSB agent, a Chinese spy, or a rogue, unaccountable element operating within our own privatized military-industrial complex to protect a trillion-dollar technological monopoly.
The physical result is identical.
Exactly. The lethal, violent enforcement of secrecy around advanced aerospace technology is a documented historical reality.
And it is exactly why, according to legislative sources, the FBI is currently being forced to conduct full-field criminal investigations into these specific scientific deaths.
They can't ignore it anymore.
Okay, so to summarize where we are, we have physical objects pulling 3,000 Gs, operating in our oceans and atmosphere, completely defying the laws of inertia.
Right.
And we have a bloody trail of dead, brilliant scientists who were seemingly getting too close to figuring out how they work.
Yes.
If we want to understand how these crafts actually operate, how they fold space and seemingly travel faster than light, and perhaps understand how these non-human intelligences actually perceive reality,
Right.
the sources say we have to abandon classical physics.
We really do.
I have to look at the bleeding edge of quantum mechanics, physics that our government has allegedly understood and been actively weaponizing for decades.
We have to shift our entire paradigm. We must move away from the physics of Newton and aerodynamics and enter the quantum realm.
Which is mind-bending.
And that journey begins with understanding the actual fabric of reality itself.
Yeah.
Space-time.
Let's break down space-time folding, because the sources provide an amazing framework for this.
They do.
According to the physics models, if you want to warp or bend space-time, you basically have two options. The first option is mass.
Massive, incomprehensible amounts of physical mass.
Yeah. The gravity on a planet like Jupiter is exponentially stronger than Earth's 9.8 meters per second squared because Jupiter's astronomically larger.
That sheer amount of physical matter literally acts like a bowling ball sitting on a trampoline. It bends the fabric of space down around it.
But if you don't have a planet's worth of mass in your spacecraft, you have to use the second option, energy.
A literal truckload of raw energy.
And this concept directs us right back to Albert Einstein's most famous equation, E equals mc squared.
Energy equals mass times the speed of light squared.
What that equation fundamentally dictates is that energy and mass are not separate things.
They are the exact same thing, just existing in two different physical states. Mass is just super condensed energy.
The sources use a phenomenal analogy to explain this conversion, and I want to expand on it so we can really picture the scale of power required to warp space. The analogy is ice and steam.
It's a great visual.
Think of physical matter mass as a solid block of ice. It's hard, it's condensed, it's heavy. Now think of pure energy as steam.
Right.
If you take a simple single cup of liquid water and you apply enough heat to convert it entirely into steam gas, that steam will expand to occupy roughly 1,700 times its original volume.
That massive, violent expansion of energy is literally the physical mechanism that drove the steam engines of the Industrial Revolution. It moves trains.
It's powerful.
Right.
Now, apply that expansion ratio to E equals mc squared.
Yeah.
If you take a physical object the size of a paperclip and you somehow convert 100% of its physical mass into pure energy.
The resulting expansion wouldn't just move a train.
No, it would release the explosive equivalent of the atomic bomb dropped on Hiroshima.
The amount of pent-up energy residing within the atomic bonds of everyday matter is staggering.
It's terrifying. So the eight-tip physics models suggest that to warp space-time enough to create a gravity bubble around a craft without using the mass of a planet, you need a propulsion system capable of generating and directing an utterly incomprehensible amount of energy.
A localized nuclear fusion reactor, at minimum.
And the reason you must warp space-time to travel between stars brings us to the ultimate speed limit of the classical universe.
The speed of light.
Correct. 186,000 miles per second.
Which sounds incredibly fast. Light moves fast enough to circle the Earth's equator 7.5 times in a single second.
That's ridiculously fast. But space is so mind-numbingly vast that even at that speed, it takes light over 4 years just to reach our nearest neighboring star system, Alpha Centauri.
And it takes 100,000 years to cross our own galaxy.
Our current classical physics says absolutely nothing can travel faster than the speed of light. But the sources point out that quantum physics has discovered a loophole.
A back door in the code of reality.
The phenomenon known as quantum entanglement.
Right.
Even Albert Einstein hated this concept. He famously derided it, calling it spooky action at a distance because it seemingly violated his speed limit.
It bothered him immensely.
I want you to explain the mechanics of how entanglement works, because it genuinely breaks my brain to think about it.
It breaks the intuitive models of every physicist who studies it. Imagine, in a laboratory, you have two subatomic particles. Through a specific process, you cause these two particles to become entangled.
Okay, they're entangled.
They now share a profound, mathematically inseparable quantum state. If you physically act upon particle A, say, you stimulate it with a magnetic field and force it to spin up, the entangled particle B will instantaneously react and spin down to balance the system.
Okay, that makes sense.
And here is the impossible, reality-breaking part of the experiment. Particle B reacts instantaneously, utterly, regardless of the physical distance separating them.
Wait, regardless of distance.
Yes. You could keep particle A in a lab in New York and place particle B on a rover on the opposite side of the known universe 10 billion light years away. When you spin particle A, particle B spins at the exact same Planck second.
At the exact same time.
The reaction is instantaneous.
Which means the information, the signal, telling the other particle to spin is traveling faster than the speed of light, which is supposed to be impossible.
Exactly. This leaves physicists with two terrifying conclusions. Either information is somehow traveling infinitely faster than light, breaking the foundational rules of cause and effect. Or, and this is the theory favored by exotic propulsion physicists, our human perception of space is fundamentally flawed.
What do you mean?
Space-time might not be a flat, smooth sheet. It might be highly porous, like a block of Swiss cheese.
Swiss cheese.
What looks like a vast, insurmountable distance of 10 billion light-years to our telescopes might actually be intimately connected by a microscopic wormhole at the quantum level.
So they aren't far apart at all.
Exactly. The particles aren't communicating across the universe. At a quantum dimension we can't see, they are sitting right next to each other.
If that quantum Swiss cheese model is how these non-human crafts fold space and travel, it gets exponentially wilder when the source material applies those exact same quantum principles to human consciousness.
This is where it gets really strange.
The documents dive deep into deeply classified, but now declassified, programs like Operation Stargate and Project Grill Flame.
Yes, the psychic spying programs.
These were real, heavily funded, decades-long programs run out of Fort Meade by the CIA, the Defense Intelligence Agency, and the U.S. Army.
Their goal, to train ordinary soldiers and intelligence officers in a protocol called remote viewing.
Which is essentially the weaponization of psychic espionage.
The operational premise was that if the universe is connected at a quantum level, human consciousness, which is essentially a complex electrical and quantum process occurring in the brain, might be able to tap into that entanglement. The military was trying to train personnel to project their cognitive awareness, to view targets separated by vast distances of space and even time without ever leaving a sensory deprivation room in Maryland.
And it wasn't just a bunch of guys in tinfoil hats making wild guesses. It wasn't a fringe experiment.
Not at all.
The sources cite the extensive documentation provided by Dr. Hal Puthoff, one of the brilliant physicists and grandfathers of the program. They detail incredible operational successes that saved lives and military assets.
Yeah, real operational successes.
I want to highlight two specific examples. In one instance, a highly experimental, classified Russian supersonic jet crashed somewhere deep in the jungles of Africa.
Right, they lost it.
The Russians were desperately looking for it. The U.S. intelligence satellites couldn't spot it under the dense canopy. As a last resort, they gave the coordinates to the remote viewers.
And what did they do?
The viewers went into a trance state, sketched the topography, the rivers, the hills, and were able to pinpoint the exact geographic coordinates. A U.S. recovery team went to those exact coordinates and found the crashed jet.
They utilized human consciousness as a non-local sensor platform. It is a staggering application of quantum theory.
But the second example is so hilariously human.
It really is.
When the military brass threatened to cut the program's budget because it sounded too bizarre, the remote viewing team decided to prove the efficacy of the protocol by predicting the future of the stock market. Specifically, they targeted silver futures.
A very pragmatic, capitalist application of quantum consciousness.
Right. The sources detail that the team successfully predicted the market movements and made $2 million in a single month.
Which is insane.
But they abruptly stopped the financial experiments because they ran into a weird metaphysical rule they called karma.
Karma.
They reported that whenever they tried to use this profound quantum ability for purely selfish monetary gain, the universe seemingly pushed back.
The viewers would get violently ill.
Or suffer severe personal misfortunes. The protocol only works safely when used for objective mission-oriented goals.
To understand how a human mind sitting in a dark room in Maryland could possibly see a crashed jet hidden in Africa, or accurately predict a commodities price next Tuesday, we have to look at the analogy the sources provide for the true nature of time.
Yes, the cigar analogy. I absolutely love this conceptual model.
It's very helpful.
Okay, typically humans think of time as a straight line, right? There is the past behind us, the present where we are, and the future stretching out ahead of us.
Linear time.
But the physicists in the source material suggest picturing the timeline of reality as a burning cigar. Look at the structure of the cigar. The ash at the end represents the past.
It has already been consumed by the fire.
Its physical structure has changed. It is done. You can't go back and smoke the ash.
Right.
The intact, unburned tobacco leaves stretching down the rest of the cigar represent the future. It is physically there, it is pre-structured, but the fire hasn't reached it yet.
Which leaves the point of ignition.
Exactly. The present moment, the reality we are experiencing right now, is just the tiny, glowing, burning cherry where the fire meets the tobacco. It is the razor-thin point of ignition.
And we live our entire lives trapped inside that tiny glowing ember moving slowly down the cigar.
But if you look incredibly closely at the burning cherry of a real cigar, it doesn't burn in a perfectly straight, flat line. It is jagged.
Some bits of the tobacco leaf are catching fire just a microsecond ahead of the others.
And some of the ash is clinging on, still glowing, a microsecond behind. The theory of remote viewing is that human consciousness, functioning as a quantum receiver, can be trained to widen its perception of that cherry.
A trained viewer can push their cognitive awareness just slightly forward into the unburned tobacco of next week's stock market, or push it backward into the lingering ash of where that Russian jet fell yesterday.
But wait, I have to stop and aggressively push back here.
Go for it.
Put yourself in the shoes of a ruthless Cold War general. If this program is real, and the declassified CIA budgets prove they spent millions on it, if the U.S. military actually possessed a squad of psychic spies who could widen the cherry of time, see inside Soviet nuclear bunkers, find any missing submarine, and predict the future.
Why shut it down?
Why on earth would they ever shut that program down? You don't abandon the ultimate weapon. Why not use it to win every single war? locate every terrorist leader, and establish total global dominance.
It is the most logical, pragmatic question you can ask. If a tool grants omnipotence, why discard it?
Exactly.
The source material reveals a fascinating and deeply tragic human reason for the termination of Project Stargate.
Tell me.
The program wasn't shut down because the data was flawed or because it failed to produce actionable intelligence. It was shut down because the underlying mechanics of it fundamentally terrified the people in power.
Terrified them.
According to the whistleblowers, deeply religious, evangelical factions within Congress and high-ranking generals in the Pentagon reviewed the data. They couldn't understand the quantum physics of non-local consciousness. Viewing it through their strict, dogmatic religious lenses, they literally concluded the remote viewing program was demonic.
Demonic. Are you serious?
They told the program directors that by reaching their minds across space and time, they were consorting with dark forces and playing with spiritual fire.
That is wild. Human religious dogma actively shut down the greatest quantum discovery in human history.
It perfectly encapsulates the profound historical tension between our rigid, comfortable belief systems and the deeply unsettling, nonlinear, unpredictable nature of quantum reality.
They just couldn't handle it.
The phenomenon challenged their worldview so aggressively that they chose ignorance. They terminated the funding and buried the research.
Which brings us to what I find to be the most deeply frustrating and raging part of this entire deep dive: the shadow government and the crushing burden of disclosure.
It is deeply frustrating.
If the government, or at least parts of it, has known about these quantum physics, these crashed 3000 G crafts and these non-human entities for 80 years, why are we, the public, only finding out about this in scattered congressional hearings now? Who is really making the decision to keep humanity in the dark?
To answer that, the source material leans heavily into the political architecture of the two governments theory.
Right. On one side, you have the visible government, the government we elect.
The president, the Senate, the Congress.
The talking heads we see debating on cable news every night. But parallel to that, functioning completely in the dark, is the unelected shadow government.
This is the entrenched military-industrial complex.
The alliance of intelligence agencies and private defense contractors that President Dwight D. Eisenhower explicitly urgently warned the American public about in his televised 1961 farewell address.
And it is crucial to understand that this shadow structure isn't necessarily an illegal cabal of comic book villains twirling their mustaches in a smoky basement.
Right, it's bureaucratic.
The sources point out that this immense secrecy operates entirely through established, complex legal loopholes.
Legal loopholes.
Specifically, they utilize the extreme legal frameworks surrounding covert action and unacknowledged waived special access programs.
Under very specific interpretations of Title 10 and Title 50 authorities, elements of the intelligence community are legally permitted and, in their view, legally obligated to lie to the American public.
And more shockingly, they are permitted to lie to the vast majority of Congress, all to protect the operational security of a highly sensitive mission.
But it goes so much further than just keeping secrets from a junior congressman. The sources detail the dysfunction surrounding the Gang of Eight or Gang of Six.
Right, the congressional leaders.
By law, these are the highest-ranking congressional leaders, the chairs of the intelligence committees, who are legally mandated to be fully briefed on all covert operations to maintain democratic oversight.
And the whistleblowers claim these elected officials are being routinely, flagrantly bypassed.
Dr. Stephen Greer, a prominent disclosure advocate cited in the sources, stated on the record that he personally conducted a briefing with a sitting Senate-confirmed director of the CIA.
And during that meeting, the CIA director allegedly told Greer point blank that both he and the President of the United States had aggressively inquired about these specific UAP special access programs.
And both the president and the CIA director were flatly denied access. They were told they didn't have the need to know.
It reveals a terrifying reality about the architecture of power.
It really does.
These code-word-level, unacknowledged projects operate completely outside the constitutional chain of command. In the eyes of the permanent, deeply entrenched intelligence bureaucracy, elected leaders like the president are essentially just temporary, four-year employees.
They're deemed too transient and too politically risky to be entrusted with the existential secrets of reality.
But occasionally, the visible elected side of the government tries to pry the lid off.
The source documents detail a remarkable, highly classified meeting that allegedly took place at the White House back in 2004.
Yes.
This was described as a week-long intensive summit involving top defense scientists, intelligence directors, and executive branch officials.
They gathered to debate one monumental question. Is it finally time for disclosure?
Should the United States government formally admit to the American people and the world that non-human intelligence exists and is operating in our airspace?
And the conclusion reached at the end of that 2004 summit is the key to understanding the last 20 years of government silence.
It was a unanimous agreement not to disclose.
Not a single dissenter.
The sources state that many of the scientists entered the room desperately wanting the truth out there so they could openly publish their physics research. But by the end of the week, they concluded that society would completely violently panic.
The economic models predicted that the global stock markets would instantly crash.
Because if the public learns that zero-point anti-gravity energy exists, the entire fossil fuel industry becomes obsolete overnight.
Exactly. The sociological models predicted that the fundamental fabric of our religious and social order would unravel.
To understand the depth of their fear regarding mass panic, we have to look at the deep historical context of human encounters with the phenomenon.
The source material emphasizes that this is not a modern issue that suddenly started with weather balloons crashing at Roswell in 1947.
Right. The Vatican archives apparently contain extensive, suppressed records of UAP history stretching back thousands of years.
The sources reference ancient Roman military texts meticulously describing Clepius, which translates to flaming metallic shields flying in formation and pacing their armies during campaigns.
Or the incredibly famous documented incident in 1561 over Nuremberg, Germany. The entire town woke up and witnessed what looked like a massive aerial dogfight.
The local printing press produced broadsheets, the newspaper of the day, showing massive geometric shapes, spheres, cylinders, and crosses, shooting beams of light at each other in the sky.
While a massive black spear hovered above the city. Or look at the biblical texts like Ezekiel's wheel within a wheel descending from the heavens. We have always seen these things, but we filtered them through the language of our era.
The sources use a powerful ecological analogy here. They compare our historical existential fear of UAPs to our ancestors' terror of the deep ocean.
Oh, this is a great analogy.
Ancient sailors used to return to port with terrified, hysterical reports of giant ship-sinking krakens, leviathans, and supernatural mermaids.
Because they didn't understand the biology, they viewed these creatures as demonic monsters sent to destroy them.
Exactly. Today, through the lens of modern biology, we know those monsters are just giant squids and manatees. We mapped their biology, we understood their ecosystem, and the supernatural became entirely naturalized.
But I have to say, naturalizing a giant squid swimming thousands of feet deep in the ocean is one thing. Naturalizing a craft that can pull you out of your bed and float you through the ceiling is entirely different.
It is.
The sources detail what I'll call micro-abductions. These aren't lights in the sky. These are terrifying, intimate physical encounters. The documents cite a horrifying case involving a highly senior CIA officer.
His wife woke up in their backyard in the middle of the night, disoriented.
Later, she developed a severe sinus issue. When she violently sneezed, a piece of technological metal, a microscopic engineered chip, literally ejected from her sinus cavity into a tissue.
That is the crux of the terror. You have a senior intelligence officer, a person at the apex of the global security apparatus, experiencing an unquestionable physical, technological intrusion into their own home, against their own family, and realizing they are utterly powerless to stop it.
Or take the testimony of the Air Force military police officer assigned to protect a highly sensitive nuclear weapons silo. He claimed that at exactly 3:30 in the morning while on patrol, he was instantly teleported from his vehicle into a sterile silver room.
And when he regained his bearings back on base, the GPS telematics data on his secure cell phone showed that during the missing time, the phone was hovering stationary 60 feet in the air above his roof.
These are not distant anomalies. These are profound, localized violations of personal sovereignty and the laws of physics.
Absolutely.
And that reality is exactly why I rigorously, angrily push back against the conclusion of that 2004 White House summit, the decision to hide the truth to protect the public.
It feels patronizing.
To me, it is the exact equivalent of a doctor running tests, finding out you have terminal stage 4 cancer and making the unilateral decision not to tell you because the news might make you sad. It's incredibly arrogant.
It is.
Don't we, as conscious beings, have a fundamental, inalienable right to know the actual reality of the universe we live in? Even if the truth is terrifying, and even if there is absolutely nothing our military can do to stop an abduction.
Your frustration is entirely justified. And to his credit, Elizondo, in the source material, directly addresses this profound civilian anger.
What does he say?
He explains that this is the core, agonizing, philosophical dilemma of modern disclosure. Put yourself in the shoes of a sitting president or a four-star general.
Okay.
Think about the fundamental premise, the very social contract of a government. Its singular primary directive is to protect and defend its citizens from foreign threats.
Right.
How does an institution built entirely on the promise of protection stand up at a podium, look into the camera, and admit two catastrophic things to the global population? First, that they have been systematically lying to, gaslighting, and occasionally silencing their own citizens for 80 years.
And second,
And far more damaging to their authority, that despite spending trillions of dollars on defense, they are completely and utterly powerless to stop these incursions.
right, like, good evening, America. We lied to you about Roswell. And by the way, if a glowing orb wants to flow through your ceiling and take your child in the middle of the night, our F-16s and our nuclear arsenal can't do a damn thing to stop it. Sleep well.
Exactly. The intelligence community's fear isn't just that people will be scared of big-headed aliens. The deeper institutional fear is that the population will completely, irreparably lose faith in the government's basic authority and ability to protect them.
Why pay taxes to a government that can't secure your airspace?
They fear an utter collapse of the institutional order.
So let's look at the totality of what we've established so far. Our classical physics are woefully incomplete. Our true technological history is being violently hidden by a shadow bureaucracy, and our public memories of historical events are heavily managed by people who paternalistically believe we can't handle the truth.
It's a lot.
But as we reach the final section of our deep dive, the sources propose a concept that is even more destabilizing.
Oh, this is the craziest part.
What if the government isn't just hiding reality? What if our actual collective memories of reality itself are fundamentally glitching?
This brings us to the final and perhaps the most psychologically unnerving conceptual framework in the source material, the Mandela effect.
Okay, yes. The sources introduce the Mandela effect, the phenomenon where massive groups of people vividly share the exact same false memory, but they tie it to a terrifying quantum theory.
They suggest that the massive high-energy particle collision experiments being conducted at CERN, the Large Hadron Collider in Switzerland, might have generated enough localized energy to inadvertently shift human consciousness into a parallel universe.
Or that reality itself is being retroactively altered at the quantum level, and only our residual memories remain.
To prove how pervasive this is, the sources use rapid-fire pop culture examples to demonstrate how millions of us misremember the exact same specific details.
Let's run through these because reading this list genuinely gave me vertigo.
It is a fascinating, highly uncomfortable exercise in testing our collective perception.
Okay, listener, play along with us. I want you to clearly picture Shaggy from the cartoon Scooby-Doo. Think of his neck. Does he have a prominent Adam's apple? He's a skinny, perpetually scared, gulping guy, right? Nope. Go look at the animation cells. He never had one. Not once.
How about the most famous cartoon character in history, Mickey Mouse? Picture his outfit. Does he wear suspenders holding up those iconic red shorts?
He does not. He has never worn suspenders.
What about the comedian Sinbad? Do you vividly remember him playing a bumbling genie in a 1990s children's movie called Shazam?
Thousands of people claim to remember the plot, the VHS cover, the jokes. It never happened. The movie does not exist. Okay, how about a trip to the grocery store? Think of the peanut butter aisle. Is the brand name Jiffy?
No, it's always been Jif, just 3 letters.
Let's look at children's literature. The famous, beloved books about the bear family. Is it the Berenstain Bears with an EIN? Or Berenstain with an AIN?
It is, and allegedly always has been Berenstain, with an A.
Curious George the monkey. Picture him swinging from the yellow hat. Does he use his tail to hold on?
He doesn't have a tail. He is an ape. They never had a tail.
The Monopoly Man. Rich Uncle Pennybags. When you picture him, he's wearing a top hat and he has a monocle on his right eye. Right, wrong. He has never worn a monocle in the history of the game.
We can even look at famous, culturally ingrained movie quotes. When you picture the movie Silence of the Lambs, Hannibal Lecter greets the FBI agent by saying, "Hello, Clarice."
Except he doesn't. If you watch the film, he simply says, "Good morning."
Ricky Ricardo in I Love Lucy, the most famous catchphrase of the 1950s, he never once, in any episode, said the exact words, "Lucy, you have some explaining to do."
Think of the tag on your underwear. The Fruit of the Loom logo. It's a pile of fruit sitting in front of a woven wicker cornucopia basket, right? No, It's just fruit. There has never, ever been cornucopia in the logo. But this last one, this is the one where my brain completely rejects reality.
The Star Wars one.
Picture C-3PO from Star Wars. He's a protocol droid. He's entirely, completely made of gold plating, right?
The visual evidence says otherwise.
He has a silver leg. From the right knee down to the foot, his leg is completely silver. I have watched the original Star Wars trilogy 100 times since I was a kid.
Yeah.
I had the action figures. I never, ever saw a silver leg.
It's jarring.
So what is happening here? Is this just the ultimate humbling proof of how unreliable and suggestible the human brain is? Is it just an editorial bad memory that millions of people coincidentally happen to share because our brains rely on heuristics and shortcuts?
Or is it something more?
Or is this a symptom of the quantum entanglement and space-time warping we just spent the last hour talking about? Are the experiments at CERN or the gravity drives of UAPs literally ripping the fabric of space-time, causing us to physically slide between adjacent parallel realities where the only difference is the spelling of a bear's name?
It's presented in the sources as a somewhat playful pop culture exercise, but it grounds a very serious, profound philosophical point for this entire deep dive.
Which is?
Whether the Mandela effect is actual evidence of a true quantum reality shift, or whether it is merely a psychological quirk of mass suggestion and shared false memory, the outcome proves a vital thesis. Human perception is incredibly, terrifyingly malleable.
We are highly programmable machines.
Precisely. Think about the implications. If the collective human consciousness can independently, spontaneously invent a monocle on a board game character or hallucinate a cornucopia on a t-shirt tag, and then defend that false memory fiercely.
How easy is it for a well-funded, highly secretive shadow government to manipulate our perception of the skies for 80 years?
If we cannot even trust our own lifelong memory of C-3PO's leg, how can we possibly trust our perception of the complex, classified reality unfolding above our heads and in our oceans? We are easily deceived, both by ourselves and by authority.
Okay, let's take a deep breath. I want to bring you, the listener, back from the edge of the existential rabbit hole.
It's been a journey.
We have journeyed a massive distance today. We started with the hard, undeniable sensor data of physical UAPs, pulling 3,000 Gs and utilizing instantaneous acceleration to completely bypass the physical laws of inertia.
We navigated the dark, bloody history of Huntsville and the terrifying capabilities of directed energy weapons silently silencing brilliant scientists.
We dove deep down into the quantum realm, where entangled particles communicate instantly across the cosmos, and remote viewers train their consciousness to widen the burning cherry of time.
And finally, we confronted the fragile, easily manipulated nature of our own collective memories.
It is a vast, heavy amount of information to process. Looking at the architecture of government secrecy, the lethal enforcement, and the incomprehensible physics, it can understandably feel overwhelming, perhaps even a bit dystopian.
It can feel like we are powerless ants living in a terrarium managed by forces we can't comprehend.
But we want to remind you of something crucial that Elizondo emphasizes. Disclosure. The monumental process of the truth finally coming out is not going to be a singular Hollywood event.
It is not going to be a single press conference on the White House lawn where the president tells us everything and introduces an alien.
Disclosure is a marathon. It is a slow, agonizing drip of information. And the very fact that you are listening to this deep dive, that you are actively analyzing this data, questioning the official narratives, and expanding your mind to hold space for these complex, reality-altering possibilities, that means you are actively participating in the mechanism of disclosure.
The shift in human consciousness is happening in real time right now through curiosity and conversations exactly like this one.
The entire architecture of the shadow government's secrecy relies fundamentally on public apathy. They need you to not care. Curiosity is the weapon that dismantles it.
Exactly. Stay curious.
So we want to leave you with one final provocative thought to ponder as you go about your day. A thought that circles all the way back to the ecological analogy we discussed earlier.
The Kraken.
Yes. For centuries, brave sailors returned from the uncharted oceans with terrified, traumatized reports of the monstrous Kraken, a literal demon of the deep that shattered their understanding of the safe, known world.
Today we call that terrifying monster the giant squid. It isn't a demon. It's a perfectly natural biological neighbor.
It just happens to live in a crushing, high-pressure zone of the ocean that we simply couldn't easily visit or understand at the time. The squid was always a natural part of our global ecosystem. Humanity just lacked the technological perspective to see it clearly without fear.
So apply that to the sky.
If these UAPs, these crafts pulling 3,000 Gs, And the non-human intelligences piloting them are real. Navigating our airspace and our deep oceans utilizing quantum physics we are only just beginning to dream of in our labs. What if they aren't demons?
What if they aren't hostile alien conquerors arriving from a distant galaxy to harvest us?
What if they are simply the giant squids of our cosmic ecosystem, existing right alongside us, just waiting for humanity to finally develop the science to understand the incredible multi-dimensional pressure zone they've always lived in? Keep your eyes on the sky, and we'll see you on the next deep dive.